This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hello, my name's Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, as per the norm. That's absolutely everything you need to know about me. Normally what I do with this podcast is I talk about a couple of stories of individual films, the production stories behind them, development stories, the bits and bobs really, those little nuances that go to make the films that we know and love just that, the films that we know and love. So an awful lot of behind the scenes stuff, generally with a bit of a mainstream leaning to it. And there's a whole archive of Film Stories episodes that I've done to date, which you're very welcome to peruse, to give really lovely reviews to and subscribe to. This episode is one of the occasional special episodes where I'm lucky enough to have a guest joining me to talk about their film work, and the guest this time is Randal Kleiser. Now he's here. He's first of all talking to me about the new Blu-ray issue of his 1986 family favourite Flight of the Navigator. But as you'll hear, we also talk about films he's directed, such as Grease and the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids sequel and White Fang. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a clip from Flight of the Navigator's trailer, and then the other side of that will go straight into my conversation with Randal, which was recorded. I think he was somewhere where in the background you get a few clanking plates, but I like to think that adds to the ambience and the atmosphere. So here's that clip, and then we'll crack on.
It's 1986, man. 8 years since that night. This is totally rad. I mean, you're my big little brother.
I think you should take a look at this. Where did this come from? From the mind of a 12-year-old boy?
He's hurt. He's calling me. His voice keeps calling, saying something over and over and over, but I can't understand very much. Help you. How?
Well, first of all, thank you for coming on and talking to me. I can't imagine what it would be like for someone to take a piece of work I did 3 decades ago and lavish the attention on it that the new Blu-ray we're getting over here of Flight of the Navigator has clearly had. I wonder if I could start by just asking you really to encapsulate what that feeling is like, because that must be quite enriching and rewarding.
It is very enriching and rewarding, and in addition, I just last year did the 40th anniversary of Grease, and so that's the same type of thing. These movies acquire somewhat of a cult following, I guess. And even on Flight of the Navigator, there's a documentary being made right now called Life After the Navigator by a director named Lisa Downs, and she is following up on all the cast and what happened to them.
And I mean, that... Again, I mean, it's a fairly obvious question, I guess, but not only is someone putting out a deluxe disc of your film, they're making a documentary about you making your film. And I mean, beyond how flattering that must be, do you get deeply involved in that? Is that a process you're interested in following?
Yes, because the boy who played the lead in Flight of the Navigator, Joey Kramer, had an amazing ride after that. I mean, he's gone through many ups and downs, and this documentary will cover that.
And I have been reading about him, and it sounds like life has thrown him an awful lot of challenges. Is he involved with that, and are you still in contact with him?
Yes, we are. We are going to probably be having a screening of Flight of the Navigator at some point in the near future, with all the cast reuniting and doing like a Q&A with the audience and all of that. So it's amazing how this movie has continued to inspire people. And I always run into people who say they really love it, and some even say it's their favorite movie ever.
I only watched it for the first time last year, and I grew up in this era, but my dad didn't take me to see it. And again, not wishing to sound sycophantic or anything, I just thought it was really, really, really good. I'm surprised just how well the theme of it, the theme and the heart of the film really stacks up today. But then I think you kind of captured human beings, and I wonder how you feel about that with regards how modern day, broad audience films are kind of wrestling with that and not having as much luck.
Well, I think a lot of the movies that have to do with human condition are moving to television and cable and satellite and all that, rather than the movie theaters where they're doing the big tentpole movies, the Marvel type stuff. So I think it's still happening. It's just moved to a different place.
So you're not someone who has frustration, for instance, with modern movies. You just perhaps think that the viewers. It sounds like I'm trying to put words in your mouth, which I'm not. I just keep querying whether you think it's a little more incumbent on viewers now to seek some of these films out, that they are still out there.
That's right. I think that's exactly right. And it's easier because if you're at home, you can see these things very quickly with all the different forms of cable and internet available, so it's not as hard as it used to be to track down interesting movies and go see them.
Just as a counterpoint to that, I guess if I was devil's advocating it, I'd play a little bit Sherlock Holmes and say the easiest place to hide things now is in plain sight, that there's that much material out there, and that perhaps curators are more needed than before. Because I know that you're very encouraging of young up-and-coming filmmakers and saying that it's never been easier to make and get your own film out there. I just wonder how you feel about whether it's harder than ever to get it seen as a consequence of that.
That's a very good point. Yes, you're absolutely right. And curators are important. That's why I love the Criterion channel, the internet, where they do curate stuff so well. Great classics and upcoming foreign films and stuff. So it's the curators are very, very important now because there's so much to see, and every time I turn around, I see there's a whole new series I've never heard of.
Yeah, and are you an avid consumer of those as well? Are you watching as many films as you always did?
I try to, but it's so hard because there's so many now, and I get hooked on one, and then it pushes into my regular work.
If I can perhaps go back to the making of this film, because I always get a little bit muddled over just on a studio level, really, whose film it is, and I wonder what it was like being at the heart of that. Because if I've got the story of this right, you were brought onto the film by Disney, but then the film wasn't done by Disney and was co-financed in Norway, and still
it was co-financed by a company called Producer Sales Organization, I believe it was called.
Yeah,
and it was more of an action-oriented company. They wanted to do action movies.
Yeah,
and so they were trying to push the movie script in the direction of action.
Yeah.
Like they wanted to have the government trying to shoot down the flying saucer, and the president gets involved in all those action beats. And Disney wanted to make it a family story. So, pretty much Disney won. But there are action beats that came from the other company, So I think it was a good mix.
And was it when Disney was overseeing the film that you came onto it? Was a screenplay in place at that point?
Yes, there were some adjustments. We'd have story conferences where one side would be talking about the family stuff and the other would be talking about shooting down the spaceship. And, there'd be like arguments about that. And so the script was in progress when we were prepping it.
But always the heart of it for you appears to be the family. I mean, you've talked about how your films, the heart of a lot of them is passage of time and the impact on that on people. And at that point, was that sacrosanct to you?
Well, no, because I was interested in doing a sci-fi movie. I've always loved them, and this was a chance. So I was not putting my foot down saying this is how it has to be. I was trying to fit in and make the film that everybody would make everyone happy.
Yeah. Because, going back to Greece, I mean, I read the memoir of Alan Carr, which was eye-bulging just to read. I can't imagine what it was like to live through most of that. But even appreciating Grease was a studio film. It was a very low-budget studio film, wasn't it? It was one just almost on the outskirts of Paramount, it seemed at the time. Whereas this just seemed, just on a technical level, dramatically more ambitious.
Probably, but they didn't really pay a lot of attention to Flight of the Navigator because it was a smaller movie. And, technically, it was the new technology that we used was something that we came up with. It wasn't something that they asked. Yeah, they didn't ask for something like that. I just thought it'd be great to do something different.
Can you take us through then what that means, the new technology that you came up with? Because I know you worked with your brother on this. I'm just curious, is it a case of you go home to your garage or something and figure it all out and take it into work the next day? Is it as simple as that?
No.
I didn't think it would be.
My brother was in New York City with a company he started called Digital Effects.
Yeah.
Which is strange. It's become like Kleenex now. It's Digital Effects is term everyone uses, but his company was called Digital Effects. It was the first one, and they were doing commercials where they were experimenting with different things. And one of the commercials that I saw him doing was a Tide bottle, Tide cleaner, laundry detergent, that changed shape in front of your eyes. And I said to him, can we make the spaceship change shape like that? And he said, yeah, we can do that. And then I saw another thing in a science fiction book about the future of science fiction where they showed an image of a chrome dog.
Yeah.
And the dog had been designed in a computer, and then the background was wrapped onto the dog, so it looked like it was mirrored. And so we combined those two ideas, the image-based lighting and the morphing, and that became the spaceship.
I'm going to ask a really dim question, but I love being an outsider and talking to people like you who are in the thick of it. But I'm just curious, how difficult was this? Because I mean, clearly groundbreaking, and the way you describe it there is very practical. But actually, when you're in the trenches with it, are there points where you're just looking at it and thinking, this doesn't work, this is impossible, or are you just having to power on?
Well, the good news is with this new DVD release, you can see all the iterations that we went through to get to this point. Because we at first we were trying things like silver paint and having that, seeing if we could have that be the movement of paint might change shape. And we tried putting Mylar on pie plates and flying them through the air to see if that would give us that look. Yeah. And then we finally started doing tests with CGI, which are all on this DVD. It's kind of interesting. You see the beginnings of it and the tests that we did, and then finally the final result.
And it sounds like you were really hands-on with this disc as well. I'd just like to ask you about that as well, because I remember reading something about when Spielberg was putting out a disc of AI and how he would just sit and watch the print with no sound, just in silence, and just watch the print for 2 hours just to see how it's measured up. Is that a similar process to you? What's your role? What's your job? What's your task list, really, when someone comes to you and says, we want to put out the best possible version of your film?
Normally I sit in a studio setting with a monitor and a colorist, but in this case it was being done in England, so we did it through the internet, and they would send me a reel at a time. A reel is 10 minutes long, and I would look at it on my computer, and if I saw anything I wanted to change, I could just click and write there what I wanted, like remove this scratch, or this is some negative dirt here, or this scene is too dark, things like that. I would write, and then they would fix it and send it back to me. And if it was great, I'd say terrific, or otherwise I'd say let's try that again.
And did you enjoy the process of it?
I did, yes. I'm kind of detail oriented.
Yeah. And I mean, were there particular things you were picking out that you weren't so keen on? The particular things that kept coming up that you wanted to fix?
Well, mostly it was dirt because, the digital movies have no dirt because they're digital.
Yeah.
But old films, anytime any dust gets into the negative when you're printing it, it turns out to be white, a white dot.
Yeah.
Or or on a print, a black dot. So you have all these black and white dots going through your, and it's annoying to see that flickering around like that. But and people are so used to digital movies now where there is no dirt that it's nice to get it all out.
Are you? I mean, clearly you've done an awful lot of work recently as well on the digital side. Where do you sit on the film versus digital divide? I mean, do you like seeing a little bit of the grain and a little bit of the thumminess of a 35mm?
I do like seeing it, but I think you can add it now.
Yeah.
You know, you can make anything look like anything these days. So, you know, it was nice, but shooting with film was always there's a disadvantage many disadvantages. Because you had to develop it, you had to wait and see it, you had to pay for it, you know, and it was more costly. You couldn't go for hours and without cutting. So there's a lot of disadvantages to film, and but you can make digital films look like film films.
And when you come to do the extra features on a disc, and thank goodness people are still doing extra features on disc, because I just think they're the best film school for an awful lot of people. How candid can you be about the production now in hindsight? And, you know, how open are you about just how tricky a film this was?
Well, now the people who were in charge at Disney are no longer there, so I don't think there's anybody there who's going to say, oh, well, don't tell that story because it's all in the past. And the movie turned out well, so the stuff that happened behind the scenes is just interesting from a production standpoint.
When, again, just going back to the book on Alan Carr, one of the stories in there talks about, because you've talked in the past about how the movies now aren't run by filmmakers, that the executives aren't filmmakers per se anymore. And just this little anecdote about how Michael Eisner at Paramount was very hands-on with the casting of even some of the supporting roles in Grease. And I'm wondering if you detected a little bit of the changing of the guard, even at that point there.
Well, I think Michael was an example of a good executive because he really had a creative streak, and he also was very childlike. Not child, but childlike, because when he would look at a movie, he would just instantly become like a kid and ask real stupid questions like a kid would. I mean, you know, it's funny because he would transform into this normal child watching a movie, and then he'd come out of it and be an executive again. So he was very helpful.
Because it is an old cliche, isn't it, that the modern-day executive doesn't like films, and yet there's an awful lot of people who swim against that.
I'm not sure about the executives today. I don't know many of them today.
You did have, you had a very busy patch with Disney in the 80s, of course. I mean, going from 80s and early 90s, going from White Fang to the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids sequel as well. And I'm assuming that's the Katzenberg era in the midst of all of that as well. But was that a similar thing, that you got these people who just wanted to make films and just wanted directors who could turn them around? That probably sells it short, actually, a little bit. I don't mean turn it around, but people that they could count on to deliver a good final film.
Yes, that's true. And the sequel to Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, I did as I was promised to do an adult movie after that, but unfortunately, Mr. Katzenberg left for DreamWorks, and so I didn't get to do that film.
Oh, what was the film you were going to do at that point?
Well, actually, it turned out to be It's My Party, which I ended up doing over at MGM.
So you were in the midst at Disney at the point very much of a changing of the guard era then. I mean, that must have been fascinating and terrifying in equal measure.
Yeah, it was a big change, and luckily I ran into John Calley at MGM just as he was beginning his tenure there, and I was one of the first movies that he made, which was great to get to make that film.
One name that has come up in previous interviews with you is Frank Price at Columbia. And I've just read Richard Attenborough's memoir, where he talks about how it was Frank Price at Columbia who was the only person who was willing to take a gamble on Gandhi, because he just read it and he believed it. He believed in it. And I'm gathering you sort of had a similar experience with the Blue Lagoon, that it was the gut instinct of Frank Price that got that made. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. And he also was the guy behind the Boys in the Hood.
Yes.
So he had really things. Yeah, Frank was terrific, and he was the one who gave me my first break directing television for Universal right out of film school.
So us on the other end of the movies, a name like Frank Price then would be slightly unfamiliar to us, I think. I just wonder, can you just talk a little bit about just what kind of supportive figure he was? Because I see his name linked with so many films that he seems to be responsible for getting moving.
Yeah, he just had really good instincts and was very supportive. I remember when we had problems with casting Blue Lagoon, we had some people that fell out at the last minute, and I went to him and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. We have a crew waiting down in Fiji, and we just lost our cast. And he said to me, I'm not worried at all, because I know when the cameras are rolling, there will be two people standing in front of them that are right.
Good grief.
So that's the kind of support he gave us.
And I mean that was what that was one of your first, your second movie as well, wasn't it? Your second cinema movie.
That's right. Yeah, the second one, and yeah.
Good grief.
He just let us go, and he let us go down to Fiji and make it. He didn't have any executives come and watch. We sent the dailies back to Hollywood, and he said they looked great. There was never any suggestions of doing things differently, and he just let me do the movie. It was great.
That sounds wonderful. And
then when it came out, there was some people who accused us of making kiddie porn, and he was insulted by that, and so was I, because it was very natural and normal. And he took full-page ads out in the New York Times talking about how it was, this was written in 1890, and it was a story of natural love and all that stuff. So he really supported it even when it was being attacked.
When it came then to Flight of the Navigator being released, going into cinemas, and clearly a lot of boulders had to be pushed uphill to get it to that point, what do you recall about its release? What do you recall about the initial reaction to it? And are they fond memories?
Well, there wasn't really a big reception for it. I mean, I think it came out fine. It wasn't a big hit. It's become much more successful in its past. It's the VHS and DVD world, and Blu-ray world, because then people can discover it and send it around. When you have a movie come out, if it's not in the right theaters and you're up against the wrong films, it's impossible to break out. But with the way DVDs and streaming today are, you can have your film can be found by people, and word of mouth on the internet can spread, and you can suddenly have a viral hit that you wouldn't have had if it was just in the theaters.
So when did you know then that this film had been found, that this had found a life beyond its theatrical release? Was there a point you got a sense of that?
Well, it's been mostly recently, because I've heard it over and over again from people that I run into, but with this resurgence of this Blu-ray that's coming out, and the Blu-ray that's coming out, and the documentary we're doing, there's a lot of swirling about it, and there's been talk of doing a remake and all of that. Yeah, there's been a lot of attention on it suddenly.
When that remake talk comes up, I mean, do you just read about it on the internet at the same time as everyone else, or are there people giving you phone calls and just asking for your ear on it?
Well, I've been talking to the people who are, some of them that have been talking about doing it, but they've been going through many scripts, and none of them have seemed to gel so that they wanted to make it. So I haven't been very involved in it, but I've just been curious,
Yeah. because I did get a sense when I was watching the film again for the first time fairly recently that you kind of really bottled something there, that you'd really captured something. That there's, I mean, I think you've said in the past that when you make a film that works, it's a lot of things just going right at exactly the same time. And do you get that feeling from this one? Did you get a sense, when you finished, that this was a film you were really proud of?
Yes, I think so, and especially the fact that I felt that we really had broken some new ground in the vision, because this was nothing had been done quite like this at that time, and I was very happy with that, and I was also happy with the emotional story of the family and how that worked.
If I can just squeeze in one or two more questions, sorry, I appreciate I'm running a little bit over. On the one hand, I am a Muppets nut, and I seem to remember at one point you've been linked with doing a Muppet film, and I'm just curious whether that was ever a thing or if that came close to happening.
Yeah, I was getting close to making it. I think that I wanted to do something different from what they had done all the time, and so I think we had some creative differences. I didn't want to just do another movie exactly like they had done, and I came up with a whole bunch of new ways to do stuff, and I think they just got a little nervous, and so they said, well, we're going to do it the old way with another director.
Your work has always struck me as sometimes quietly and sometimes a bit more loudly, technically groundbreaking, but never really for the sake of it. And I go back to that Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, and it would have been very easy to do a lot of, even then, digital stuff where you were actually just doing more traditional forced perspective practical shots. And I'm kind of curious where your head is on this, that particularly for people coming through now, surrounded by lots of digital tools, how do you know which ones to choose and which ones not to choose? Where does your instinct come from for the right way to attract material where there could be digital shortcuts?
If you can do it in the camera, it always looks better, I think. The digital work has gotten so good, but you're often aware that it's digital, and it sort of takes you out of the movie. When you see something that looks so real and is real, that has a tangible feel to it. I mean, I know when we did White Fang, we used real wolves for all the shots. I think I've heard that they might be doing a remake of that, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of digital wolves, and there will be a big difference between watching those two movies, I'm sure.
And what are the inevitable question, perhaps? But what are the projects that you're juggling at the moment? Because you seem incredibly busy.
Well, right now I'm working on building three smart stages in Hollywood that will become a playpen for future projects, where we'll have the latest cutting-edge technology. It's Occidental Studios, and we are getting all the video walls and the motion capture and virtual set materials all in one spot that people can come and use. So for me, I'm focusing on that, so I'll have a playpen to work in.
And is that your company and your studio?
No, it's a friend of mine that I've worked with many years, Craig Darien. He used to be he used to do the sound mixing of all my movies, and now he has his own studio, and he's asked me to come in and help him make this new technological super sound stage.
And will we see more of your stories as a consequence of that as well?
Well, I now have a virtual reality series online called Defrost, which is on Oculus and on Samsung, and then I also have a thing I did for Intel and Paramount, which was You're the One That I Want, as done by capturing 20 dancers in volumetric capture, and that's a little app that we're working on getting out to the public. Right now it's sort of high end. We're trying to make it so it works on smaller formats, and that's experimental. And Intel has a giant sound stage down in Manhattan Beach with a big dome, and they're doing all this cutting-edge stuff, and I was lucky enough to get to play with it.
And if I can just ask you one more question, you said right near the start that you've always been a sci-fi fan and always loved sci-fi. I wonder if you can just recommend us one of your favourite sci-fi movies.
Well, let's see. I think actually, it's not really sci-fi. It's more of a thriller. It's called Seconds.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Rock Hudson's movie. I love that movie. It's in a way it's sci-fi because it's about plastic surgery and replacing people and stuff. That's one of my favorite movies. It's not really sci-fi, but of course I like all of my roommate George Lucas's films, Star Wars.
Yeah, I wasn't going to ask you the question about did he snore. I saw someone ask you something along those lines once, but what an incredible start to a working career. Randal Kleiser, thank you so much for your time. A real thrill to talk to you.
Thank you, Simon. Bye-bye.
Take care. And with that, our interview was over. If you're interested in a really quite impressive Blu-ray reissue of Flight of the Navigator, it's out in the UK as from Second Sight as this podcast is being released into the world, and you can purchase it from all the usual places as you can with Randal Kleiser's the rest of Randal Kleiser's back catalogue. If you're interested in film stories, you can find me at Simon Brew on Twitter. You can find the Film Stories website at www.filmstories.co.uk, where you can buy copies of our magazines if you would like. That would be hugely appreciated. You can find out about our live tour around the UK that's just incoming at the time this has been recorded. We also have a whole host of video film stories that you can find at youtube.com/filmstories. And I'll be back with your regular episode of the Film Stories podcast early next week, assuming you're listening to this sequentially, and if not, I'll be back with your regular episode of the Film Stories podcast whenever you press the download button on the next episode that's popped up on your podcast feed. You all take care. Thank you very much for your support. Bye bye.